Well, Matt, as someone who's now viewing this from 30,000 feet away, what would you say is your takeaway from what the Bears have done over the last week?
I like it. I think it's great to have a head coach that you trust to where you can go get players that fit his scheme and where he can even articulate to you what that scheme might be, and so that you can go get those players. I think that is a obvious upgrade for where the Bears were a year ago, and I like it. I mean, we've seen polls be aggressive in trading up in the draft, in trading out in the draft, in taking a punter in the fourth round. Like we've seen polls be aggressive a lot of different ways. I like the idea, and it doesn't take a great football mind to watch the Chicago Bears last year and say, gosh, they got to get better at guard, center, and guard, right? Like we all kind of understood that. But to be able to look at those needs and say, okay, we're going to go get high impact players. You know, there's familiarity with Jonah Jackson and Ben Johnson. There is certainly Joe Tooney is a leader, a great player who gives you some versatility if you need it. And then Drew Dalman, the top center in free agency. So I think the great thing coming out of this, and the way I look at this moving forward, is the Bears have checked off every need. You know, like we all do those. Here are the Bears' top 5 needs headed into free agency. We all do those lists. They've checked them all off. And so at number 10 overall now in the first round, and with those 2 early second round picks, there's a lot of flexibility to maybe even just go best player available at those spots.
Well, let's focus on exactly that. I had this reaction, Matt, and you would know if there's someone who's worthwhile. But like, to me, once you have traded for 2 guards and drafted your center, I think interior offensive line is off the table at 10.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it would be. I would say offensive line is off the table at 10, just because there's no indication that they aren't Braxton Jones fans. I've actually talked to Poles about this, not super recently, but like we've had Braxton Jones conversations. They drafted Darnell Wright in the top 10. So I would say, like, I would probably take offensive line off your radar at 10.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about left tackle. Like if Will Campbell falls because of some crazy arm length, idiocy out there. But it's interesting. Your take on the because you think Braxton Jones is the guy if he comes back healthy.
If he comes back healthy, I think he's at least the guy for 2025. I don't feel super convicted about a Will Campbell to where I would take him over Ashton Jeanty or Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, and maybe even some of the defensive ends. Like I don't see Will Campbell as Joe Alt or Penei Sewell, where you got to draft him. Because there is the arm length stuff, and people can laugh at it, but there's not a good left tackle in the NFL with under 33-inch arms. Just it doesn't exist. 33 and a half is probably the best in the NFL right now. That's Rashawn Slater. So there's not a precedent for that. Even as you project him to guard, he's going to have to completely rework his stance. I don't know if you guys have talked to anyone about that as we're about 45 days away from the draft. Will Campbell plays with the most upright stance I've ever seen for an offensive lineman in my life. And we're going to ask him to play guard. He's going to have to completely rework his stance. That's doable, but he's not this plug and play guy. I love the work ethic, the character. He's hilarious, super productive at LSU, but he is a player that's going to need some work as he transitions into the NFL.
Inevitably, someone in the group between 10 and 25 ends up being special. But when I look at this draft, Matt, I feel like there aren't any bad choices, which makes me feel like the Bears should trade down and get more picks. How do you view the middle of the first round?
I think in the middle of the first round, you're going to have 30 guys who all have the same grade. So to your point, if all your blue chip players are gone at 10, then yes, you should trade down, because the value that you're getting at 10 is going to be similar to what you might get at 15 or 20. So if that market exists, and it might, if let's say Shedeur Sanders is still on the board and somebody decides they need to go up and get him, and we'll see, because like the musical chairs at quarterback is very much still ongoing with free agency right now. But if Ashton Jeanty's gone, if the 2 tight ends are gone, and one of the top pass rushers are gone, that's, I think, your scenario to trade out. Because, like drafting a receiver at 10, I think you can move back and get like the number 1 receiver in this class. I think it's Luther Burden from Missouri. I have coworkers who think it's Tedero McMillan and coworkers who think it's Matthew Golden. And some people would say Emeka Ibuka is right there. So even if you say like, hey, let's just get a pass catcher in round one, I think you can move back from 10 and get a really similar value. And the crazy thing is you might even be able to move back twice, just depending on what happens. And, we'll see how they identify where that need is, even if it's at running back. If Jeanty's gone and you say, no, we know how important a running back is, we're going to take O'Mary and Hampton. Well, you can trade back and do that. Now you got to keep an eye on Dallas at 12. But you could certainly, you just want to probably stay ahead of Pittsburgh at 21, depending on what they do at quarterback, to where you would still feel pretty good about getting an impact running back in round one.
I think I messed Spiegs up on Ashton Jeanty, Matt, and I feel bad about it because I like Ashton Jeanty. I didn't like how he played against Penn State. There are a lot of things that had me questioning what the hell was going on with him not being able to secure the ball. But you're playing up against a really good defense and a team that played for a national championship.
Let me jump in, Lawrence, though, but because having watched a lot of the highlight reel stuff, because when I went on my little running back curiosity rabbit hole the other night, Jeanty bounced off a lot of bad tacklers in his conference. That's what I saw in addition to what you were talking about.
So from your perspective, what's the truth on Ashton Jeanty? What is he and what do you think he can be?
I think he's really, really good. I don't think that he's not up there for me with Bijan Robinson or Saquon Barkley as the best running backs that I've evaluated. There are going to be those questions about level of competition. I don't have my notes in front of me. I want to say it's against Oregon he played really, really well. And so that made me feel a little bit better about it. What I love about him is he had over 1,700 yards after contact. So to your point, there was some bad tackling at that level, obviously. But that, if you just took his after contact yards, he would have been the number 2 rusher in the country last year behind O'Mary and Hampton. So there's that ability is crazy. And his contact balance is crazy. And if you go back to 2023, they actually threw him the ball a lot. He had 600 yards receiving. I think it might have been the most of any running back in FBS. It's way, way up there. So his tape is over the 2 years is awesome. He's a little bit he's a little bit short. I don't want to say undersized. He's a little bit short. He's 5'8", 215 pounds. It's some of the contact balance is natural, but man, he can do everything. And, to your point, that Penn State game, everyone in the stadium, everyone in the country knew where the ball was going to go because Boise State couldn't throw the ball to save their lives this year. So I don't hold that one against him so much. I think we got a guy who didn't fumble a lot prior to that, and he's just beat to hell at the end of a really long season where he was the guy for them, over 2,400 yards rushing this past year.
Well, let's follow up on it then, because the guys you mentioned, Bijan Robinson, he's not that, and Saquon Barkley, he's not that. Bijan and Atlanta is not doing a whole lot of winning because they need more. Yep. Saquon and the Giants didn't do a whole lot of winning until he got to the Eagles. So that's part of why I want the Bears to get a running back down at number 72 in the third round, or maybe number 41 in the second round if they got to. Do you have some running backs who will be available there? I've got one, but let's hear who you like, who will be available either at 41 or 72 that could fit in nicely. They're going to keep DeAndre Swift as kind of their speedier guy, so I give you that as context.
I still like Roschon Johnson as well as a number 3. And I know there's a lot of people there that still like him. So I do think adding one is reasonable. Okay, so let's say in round 2, if you're going to keep DeAndre Swift, in round 2, I would add Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State, who has the nastiest stiff arm of any player in this draft. His favorite thing to do is almost palm the forehead of defenders and slam their face mask down, which I absolutely love. It's kind of a throwback. So Judkins, and to your point, watch him in the college football playoff run. He was unstoppable. I mean, he was just such a bulldog for that offense. So he would be your round 2 option. Caleb Johnson from Iowa is tailor-made for an outside zone scheme, which is what you now have. So I think you have to factor him in. If you wait until round 3, what's interesting I have 3 running backs with a round 3 grade. They're all smaller guys. Dylan Sampson is 200 pounds. Trevor Etienne, right around 200 pounds. And Jaden Blue from Texas, right around 200 pounds. And they're all more speed guys than they are power guys. So if you're looking for more of that bumper, round 3, in my opinion, is too early for Cam Scatabo from Arizona State, who I think everyone fell in love with during the Texas game. He's probably an early round 4 guy. If you told me that, hey, you got to reach to make sure you get him at 72 since you don't have a 4, I would probably want to try to trade back. But 72's mid-round 3. That's not the craziest reach in the world if you decide to go for him there.
There's also an opportunity here for the Bears to go get a defensive end as well. I think they probably will help themselves out a lot in that regard. Who do you like, and who's worth waiting on and seeing kind of where things go? And is there a bargain out there to be had at the end?
So it's a great defensive end class. I have 6 guys with first-round grades right now. Here's a fun, / crazy scenario for you, okay? Let's say Cam Ward goes first to the Titans. Shedeur Sanders goes second to the Browns. Would you trade up for Abdul Carter? You had 2 second-round picks. Checked a lot of needs.
I would.
And it's not going to be as expensive to trade up for a non-quarterback.
I would, but I'm crazy about him, so.
I am too. He's my number 1 player in the draft. So I'm like, and I agree with you, even with adding Deo and you have Montez Sweat, I still think the defensive end could be an early-ish need here, right? Just because the way teams are building. So, if Abdul Carter, I don't think he would make it past New England at 4 because I think Vrabel would draft him. But if that scenario is there and the Giants are panicking, it's like a full-on Kevin Costner draft day moment and the Giants are panicking, I would absolutely try to trade up to take him. Now, take that scenario off the dreamland table here. I think Mykel Williams from Georgia could be there at 10. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M probably had a good enough combine that he's put himself ahead of where the Bears are at. I think the Jets at 7, the Panthers at 8, the Saints at 9 are all certainly in play for him. The weird thing is there's a drop-off after that, and it becomes some guys with some character questions. Mike Green from Marshall, it was disclosed at the Combine that he was accused of sexual assault once in high school, and then a separate time while he was at Virginia, which led to his dismissal there, and he ends up at Marshall, leads the FBS in sacks last year. James Pierce from Tennessee, I was doing ESPN National Radio a week ago, and Ian Fitzsimmons asked me about him, and Fitz said that the folks at Tennessee wouldn't even let them talk to James Pierce last year. As they were embedded with the team, they were keeping him away from the media. So those 2 guys, I know you're going to see a lot of them in mock drafts. Man. I don't think they go anywhere close to the top 10, though.
Your scenario that you painted for the dream of trading up to get to Abdul Carter is interesting because as the last 2 weeks have gone on, I have heard people talk about Shedeur in ways I was not expecting people to talk about Shedeur, like the idea that he could end up not being drafted in the first round. What's going on here?
There's a couple things, and I think he'll be drafted in the first round. I don't think he would fall all the way out. I think part of it is the more people that get invested in the draft, I think the more information gets shared, right? In season, a lot of media members are worried about in-season stuff. We get to the Combine, and that's when, more folks get involved in covering the draft. So more information like that is apt to get out instead of stay in-house a little bit. I don't buy he's brash and he's cocky. I'm sure folks have that opinion. Just like if the 3 of us were to sit down with 45 draft prospects and we got 15 minutes with each of them, the 3 of us aren't going to agree on every player's personality and composure. And so it wouldn't be, crazy for me to go to a media member and say, gosh, I really didn't like how that player interviewed. That certainly happens. I will say the consensus from scouts I've talked to is they've liked their interviews with Shedeur. He is confident, but he is a coach's son who loves football, who has elevated 2 programs that he's been at. He's worked hard. And I would say this, you will not find a tougher football player in this class. I was at the Kansas game, and Kansas, they took some shots at him that were they were to the echo of the whistle, right? And it didn't rattle him, and he didn't come out. And I mean, he was taking shots to the knee, the head, and he just stayed in and played. So he's incredibly tough. Now, could he slip a little bit? Yes. I think just we're seeing how free agency has played out, where the Raiders trade for Geno Smith. The Jets signed Justin Fields. Neither of those guys are top 10 quarterbacks, but teams are trying to secure those spots. So that's either those teams are out on Shedeur Sanders, or they don't think he was ever going to make it to them in the first place at 6 and 7, respectively. So there's a little bit of gamemanship happening right now. He could still be the second pick in the draft, guys.
Man, such fun stuff with NFL draft scout Matt Miller. You talk about Abdul Carter, and you lose Lawrence for the rest of the segment.
Pretty much.
You talk about the running backs and land on my guy, Quinshon Judkins, and you lose me for the rest of the segment. I'm just sitting here. Can you describe the move again? It's a stiff arm to the helmet,
a palm of the helmet,
essentially.
Yeah, he like palms their helmet and slams their face mask down. It's amazing.
It really
Watch
is.
the Tennessee game.
Tennessee
game. He just like, it's fun.
So if they grabbed him at 41, let's say they go D end and then offensive line and Quinshon Judkins from their first 3 picks.
I'd be pretty happy. I'd be pretty happy with that. I think you gotta look at receiver at some point. Just with Keenan leaving, I think you gotta look at receiver. I still think you could maybe go corner or free safety at some point, but we're starting to get pretty picky at that point.